Good afternoon, class. I hope that you all had a wonderful weekend. I know I saw a number of you over at Wizard's Wands yesterday, so I know that you're at least eating well. But that's enough talk about wonderful kebab shops. Now on to today's lesson. Spells. Now spells come in all shapes and sizes, however most of them tend to share commonalities, that being belonging to a school of magic and the order of operation of casting. We won't be focusing on the schools of magic and how they are categorized today because we went over that when we were discussing magic in general. Just remember that spells are usually grouped into one of the known 8 schools of magic. However, we will be discussing the order of operations of casting. While again, remember that nothing is a hard rule in magic, this order does come up a lot, that being Imagine, Make, and Cast, or IMC. The first step, Imagine, is all about deciding what spell you wish to cast, visualizing what it will look like and what effect it will cause. Pretty simple, right? Well, the next step is a bit more complex. Step 2, Make, is all about actually doing the process that will create the spell, which at first glance seems more important than step 1. However, if you don't visualize the spell first, the end product comes out wild and without a defined shape, causing it to be ineffective or sometimes even dangerous. The final step, Cast, is the releasing of the spell, the final seal of approval. If the spell requires any aiming or targeting, most of that is done in this step. Now why don't I give you an example with an activity you're all quite familiar with, walking. Now if I were to take a step as if it were a spell, I would first imagine that I wish to take a step, choose to use my right foot, and visualize in my mind taking a step forward with my right foot. Next, I would start moving my right leg up, forward, then downward, finally committing to casting my foot downward and placing it on the ground. That is the order of operations for casting a spell, or at least the very basic version. Now lastly, before we end class, let's discuss spell components. There are 3 types of spell components, verbal, somatic, and material. You will sometimes see these abbreviated as VS or M. Different spells require different things, however most require at least one of these. Verbal is all about sound. Some spells require sounds in order to be cast. This is usually in the form of words or phrases in some form of language. You will find that many of the spells you will learn here require bass draconic. But it is not always words. For example, many bards play on their instruments to fulfill this requirement. Next, somatic is tied to finger and hand movements. As you may recall, I once said that many casters pluck and pull on the weave in order to cast spells. That would be somatic movements, the pulling, pushing, or gesturing of casting. Last is material. Now, we will touch on all of this in more depth at a later date, but this most of all. Material components are physical items required for the casting of a spell, like ingredients for baking. Now, many of these materials can be replaced with the use of a focus, such as a wand or staff. However, some spells, especially stronger ones, require expensive specific materials that cannot be replaced with a focus. Now, those are the 3 categories of spell components, and they are normally used during the second stage of Make while casting a spell. Looks like we're out of time. I'll see you all on Elbiste, and if you have time, read the next part of the chapter before class. We will be going over different magical focuses in more depth.